Hey, my name is Soraya, and the last time I ever stood beside my family, I walked away with third-degree burns and something worse, silence. The party was flawless. Crystal chandeliers, a live string quartet playing Coldplay's Yellow, waiters in tuxedos carrying trays of champagne that cost more than my rent, people clinking glasses, laughing in coordinated tones that reeked of money and generational privilege, the kind of night designed to impress and intimidate. My sister Serena's engagement party was a theatrical production disguised as family celebration, staged perfectly at the Alcott Estate in Orange County, a place so aggressively perfect it felt sterile. Every corner was curated for Instagram. The champagne tower, the floral archway, even the golden S plus D letters floating in the pool. And then there was me, tucked at the farthest table, alone, in a black dress I bought secondhand. It wasn't ugly, but it wasn't screaming family favorite either. "Why are you even here?" my sister whispered behind a smile as she leaned in for a fake hug. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but the venom was there. Same tone she used since we were kids, and she'd tell me I didn't belong. "I was invited," I said softly. She laughed. "Yeah, pity's a powerful thing." I should have walked away then, but I didn't. It was exactly 47 minutes into the event when my mother cornered me with a glass of something too dark to be wine. She wasn't drunk. She never drank. But her rage was something else entirely. Calculated. Cold. "We need to talk," she said. "Outside." She led me to the side garden, where no guests wandered. Somewhere between the rose bushes and the marble fountain, I saw him. My father, Charles. Standing there, arms crossed, with that same expression he wore during every award ceremony Serena was honored at, and every silence I was left to sit in. My mother's voice was clinical. "You owe your sister." That was the opening line. No greeting. No soft entry. "For what?" "For this. For everything we've given you. The school you dropped out of. The rent we paid when you were unemployed. The years you embarrassed us by doing whatever it is you do." "I'm a freelance editor," I replied calmly. "That's not a career. That's a phase," she snapped. "Now listen. We need you to contribute to the wedding fund." I laughed. I didn't mean to, but it slipped. "You want me to help pay for Serena's wedding?" My father stepped in. $100,000. That's nothing, considering all we've done for you." I looked between them. "You think I have 100 grand just sitting somewhere?" "We know about the inheritance," my mother said flatly. "Your grandmother left you money. You've been living off it." I froze. That was supposed to be private. I hadn't told them. No one had. "I'm not using Nana's money for a luxury wedding." "She was our mother too," my mother seethed. "And Serena deserves a wedding that matches our family's name." I took a breath. Then maybe she should ask the family that actually gave her everything. That's when it happened. My mother didn't even flinch. She raised her hand. The glass tilted, and a stream of scorching liquid hit my cheek, jaw, neck, and shoulder. Hot coffee, straight to the skin. It stung instantly, blistered within seconds. My dress stuck to my body. The glass hit the marble with a sharp clink. "Spoiled. Ungrateful little," she began. But I couldn't hear the rest. My ears rang. My eyes watered. Not just from pain, but from something far deeper. Humiliation. The kind you don't cry about in the moment. The kind you store inside and let fester. Behind her, guests had turned, phones out, faces twisted in curiosity and confusion. Serena stood by the champagne tower, frozen. "My father?" He walked over, placed a napkin in my hand, and said coldly, "Clean yourself up. You're making a scene." There's a specific kind of silence that settles when no one comes to your defense. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked out. Past the crowd, the valet, the gates. The burns weren't just on my skin. They were everywhere inside me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, then drove to urgent care by myself. No calls from my family, no texts, nothing. Just silence. as if I had finally become what they always wanted: invisible. But here's what they didn't know. That night didn't destroy me. It gave me clarity. Because pain has a way of wiping the fog off the mirror. You see everything for what it is. No illusions, no fantasies. And for the first time in my life, I stopped wishing they'd love me. I started planning. The burn on my cheek was healing faster than I expected. The ones on the inside? Not so much. 3 days after the engagement party, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, gently applying ointment to the blistered skin along my jawline. It looked like a sunburn now, angry and red, but fading. I half wished it would scar. Something visible, something permanent. Proof. I hadn't heard a word from them. Not a single text, not even a fake "hope you're okay" from Serena. Some part of me, the part still starved for scraps of maternal decency, imagined my mother regretting it. Maybe pacing around the kitchen, crying into her French-pressed coffee. But that was fantasy. My mother didn't cry. She calculated. Controlled. She didn't explode like that because of anger. She did it because she could. Because she thought I wouldn't fight back. She was right. I didn't fight. Yet. That afternoon, I drove to my grandmother's old house. It was still mine, technically. She had left it to me in her will, something that irritated my entire family to no end. My grandmother had been the only person in my bloodline who ever looked at me like I was enough. She used to say, "Soraya, they don't hate you. They just hate anything they can't mold." Back then, I didn't understand what she meant. I did now. The house smelled like cedar and old memories. Faint perfume still lingered in her closet. I hadn't lived there in years, but I kept it spotless. A shrine to someone who once believed in me. I went into the study, opened the drawer she always warned me never to let my mother near. Inside, nestled between her old journal and her dusty legal pad, was a brown envelope with my name on it in her handwriting. "In case they ever try to take what's yours." My heart pounded. I hadn't seen this before. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were bank statements, several of them, accounts under my name. That's when I saw it. Over $3.2 million in transferred funds across 3 accounts. The amounts didn't match my inheritance, not even close. These were different. And worse, the deposits started 5 years ago, way after she passed. I wasn't handling this money. I wasn't spending it. Someone was laundering money through my name. I spent the next hour on my laptop, cross-referencing account numbers. One trail led to a shell corporation tied to my father's firm. Another traced back to a trust fund I never authorized. The pattern was clear, systematic, precise. They'd used me. No, he had used me. My father had always acted like I owed him, like he was keeping me afloat. Turns out I was the safety net, the alibi. Every insult. Every time he'd looked at me like I was some failure clinging to their wealth. It wasn't shame. It was guilt projection. He needed me to believe I was worthless, because if I ever realized I was essential to his entire operation, he'd be ruined. I printed every document I could, made copies, scanned everything to the cloud. And then I sat in the living room, surrounded by silence and proof of betrayal. My head throbbed, my stomach twisted. The child inside me wanted to cry. But the woman I was becoming? She felt something different. Power. That night, I called the one person I hadn't spoken to in years. "Is this Amanda?" A pause. "Yeah, who's this?" "It's Soraya." The line went silent. I could hear her breathing. "Wow! Been a minute." Amanda had been my best friend in college, before everything fell apart, before my father showed up at my apartment with a check and a warning, before I ghosted her without explanation. "I need your help," I said. A long exhale. "Of course. What's going on?" "I think my father's laundering money, through me." I heard her sit up straighter. Amanda wasn't just my old friend. She was a forensic accountant for the government now, working on high-level fraud investigations. "You're serious?" I sent the files over. 5 minutes later, she called me back. Soraya, this isn't just laundering. This is federal prison kind of laundering. We spent hours mapping out the web. Every fake company, every disguised transfer, every lie. Amanda was stunned. I know guys who've gone down for half this. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. And here's the part that's going to piss you off the most, she added. What? This system only works if you stay quiet. You're the legal owner on these accounts. If this goes to trial, your name is the one they'll drag. My hands trembled. Which means he set it up, so if it all falls apart, I go down. Yeah, he's made you the scapegoat. I didn't sleep that night. I laid awake on the guest bed in my grandmother's room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, trying to map out my next move. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was the root of everything. Why I'd been treated like a burden. Why they never invested in my future. Why my mother could pour coffee on my face and feel no remorse. I was never a daughter to them. I was a legal shield, an accidental asset, a name on a document. And once I outlived my usefulness, they'd discard me without hesitation. But not this time. This time, I wouldn't be silent. This time, I'd dismantle them. Quietly, carefully, brilliantly. Because what they feared most wasn't my pain, it was my intelligence. And I was done playing dumb. The problem with seeing everything clearly is that it's hard to ever close your eyes again. That week, I didn't sleep much. I wasn't scared. I was awake. In every sense. Amanda and I kept our contact limited and encrypted. Burner email addresses, VPNs, the whole 9 yards. She knew better than anyone how easily financial criminals can intercept and track communications, especially ones who sleep in penthouses and build empires out of lies. You realize, she said one night over a secure call, he didn't just use your name. He built an entire identity out of you. You're the foundation. If you go public, he crumbles, I finished. Amanda paused. You sure you want to do this? That question sat in my chest like an anchor. It wasn't about want. It was about need. I moved quietly, rented a small storage unit on the outskirts of Glendale, the kind with metal doors and keypad access. I kept everything there, hard copies, flash drives, photos. A paper trail of my father's empire, seen through the cracks he thought I was too dumb to notice. But the revenge couldn't be loud. Not yet. It had to breathe, stretch, grow roots. I wasn't just going after a man. I was going after a system he created. And worse, the one my mother and sister helped uphold. Because if Charles was the king, they were his courtiers. And they'd polish the throne with their silence. One afternoon, I decided to return to the house. Not to visit, not to talk. To listen. I had an old security badge from the corporate office my dad once forced me to intern at, one of the few opportunities he offered me when I was fresh out of college and still hopeful enough to think he believed in me. I knew he never deactivated it. That day, I dressed like someone invisible. Beige coat, ponytail, no makeup. I walked right in. The receptionist didn't even blink. I slipped into the elevators like a shadow and headed to the executive floor. My father's office, Suite 17C, had glass walls and a view of the city that screamed invincibility. I stood across the hall, waited. When he left for lunch, I moved fast, slipped in before the door could shut. The room smelled like leather, ambition, and fraud. I knew what I was looking for. The wall safe behind the cabinet. The password had always been my sister's birthday. Typical. Inside, more documents, more names, more proof. And then something else. A burner phone, taped underneath the drawer. It was still on. I opened the messages. The most recent text, timestamped that morning, read, S is getting too close. We move everything end of month. New name, new route. S. Not Serena. Me. They knew. I should have panicked. I didn't. I copied every message, forwarded them to Amanda. Then I shut the drawer, walked out, and returned the security badge to the potted plant in the lobby, where I always used to hide it during lunch breaks years ago. Symmetry. Poetic in a way. That night, I sat in the old guest bedroom at my grandmother's house and stared out the window. The city was quiet. Traffic lights flickered like slow, methodical blinks. And that's when I felt it, for the first time in a long time, calm. Not because I was safe, but because I finally understood the rules of the game. He wasn't going to stop unless I made him. He was moving money, changing names, covering tracks. I had to be faster. The next phase required something else entirely. Performance. I texted my sister. "Let's talk. I don't want to fight anymore." She responded in less than 10 seconds. "Finally. Come to brunch tomorrow. Mom's coming too." Perfect. Brunch was held at a rooftop restaurant in downtown LA. Serena wore white, always white, like she thought the color would bleach her of wrongdoing. Mother wore navy, polished, controlled. "Soraya," she said with a nod. No apology, no acknowledgement. "I'm not here to rehash anything," I said as we sat. I don't want to be the outsider anymore." Serena smiled like she'd won something. "Good," she said. "It's exhausting being the glue." I bit back a laugh. Glue? More like glitter on a cracked vase. They ordered mimosas. I stirred my tea and watched them. They didn't notice my phone was recording the entire conversation. Not until Serena said it. "We told Dad you'd come around. He was worried you'd go full meltdown." "I told him," Mother added. "She's too proud to go public. She values our name too much." "And besides," Serena said, sipping, "if she tried anything, she'd take herself down too." They laughed. They laughed. When I got home, I uploaded the audio to the cloud. Amanda texted me within the hour. "You just got gold. We're almost there." And still, I said nothing. No confrontation, no calls. Silence was my sharpest weapon, and for the first time in my life, I wielded it perfectly. You know how some moments split your life into before and after? For me, it wasn't the coffee, or the betrayal, or even the discovery of $3.2 million in my name. It was the brunch. Because that was the day I realized my silence didn't just make me small, it made them sloppy. The audio file Amanda called gold wasn't just incriminating. It was proof of a larger truth. My family had never feared the consequences because they never imagined I had any power. They were wrong. 2 days later, I got a message from Amanda. "Got you a meeting, confidential, media, no names, no details. Just a time, a location. Downtown LA, 2 floors below street level, in a repurposed film studio that now housed an investigative journalism group. The kind that didn't chase headlines. They made them. The woman I met with, Sophia, had eyes that looked through people, not at them. "You're Soraya?" "Yes." "You brought documentation?" "I brought enough to sink a fleet." She didn't smile. "We'll need more than paper to go public." I slid a drive across the table. "Audio recordings, from brunch with my mother and sister. They confirm knowledge, motive, collusion." Sophia plugged in her laptop and listened with noise-canceling headphones. I watched her face, still focused, like a sniper. When she finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "This isn't a scandal," she said. "It's a blueprint of a family laundering image, money, and guilt through one person's silence." She closed the laptop. "Let's make them hear you." We didn't go public immediately. That wasn't the play. The article would take weeks. Background checks, financial verifications, legal buffers. But Sophia had a suggestion. "A teaser," she said. "Not from us. From you." "What kind of teaser?" "A question," she said. "A question only people involved would recognize." That night, I posted to my dormant Twitter account. What would happen if the scapegoat spoke first? 15 words. No hashtags. No names. Within hours, I had dozens of DMs. By morning, the tweet had gone viral. 80,000 retweets. People speculating, guessing, projecting their own stories. But one message stood out. Blocked number. No profile pic. Careful who's listening. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Later that week, I was invited, anonymously, to a corporate gala. My father's company was sponsoring the event. The theme? Integrity in leadership. The irony was so thick, it almost tasted sweet. I RSVP'd, yes. The venue was all marble and glass. I wore black velvet, red lipstick, my grandmother's watch, the one no one else in my family dared touch. I didn't speak to anyone, just floated through the crowd like smoke. And then I saw him, Charles, laughing, holding court, holding champagne. Always the image of sophistication. When he turned and saw me, he froze for half a second, then recovered. "Soraya," he said, with the measured warmth of someone addressing a business deal. "You look healthy." "I am," I said. "Turns out silence was making me sick." He smiled like it was a joke. "It's not safe for you to be here," he said quietly. "You're out of your depth." "I'm exactly where I belong," I replied. Then I handed him a small white envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a screenshot of the text message I'd found on his burner phone. "S is getting too close. We move everything end of month." His eyes flickered. "Don't worry," I said softly. "That message isn't in the press yet." He gripped the envelope tighter. "What do you want, Soraya?" And for the first time, I answered honestly. "I want you to be afraid." I left before the speeches started. Outside, I stood in the cold night air and let it hit me. The clarity, the weight, the inevitability. There was no turning back now. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a threat. 2 days later, the article dropped. Front page of a major independent outlet. Title: Blood Money: How a Family Built an Empire on the Silence of Their Youngest. My name was in it. So was his. So were theirs. The article didn't just expose the financial crimes. It mapped out the emotional ones. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the use of inheritance to buy silence, the abuse disguised as discipline, the image of a perfect family, cracked wide open. Phone calls poured in. Reporters, podcasters, people I hadn't spoken to since college. I ignored them all. Then came the letter. Not from a stranger, from Serena. It was handwritten, short, neat. "You've always wanted to destroy us. I should have known. But this was calculated. Not revenge, assassination. I hope it was worth it." There was no apology. Only resentment. Proof that even now she thought she was the victim. I folded the letter and tucked it between the pages of my grandmother's journal. Let it sit there like the fossil it was. Amanda called that night. "You okay?" I didn't know how to answer that. I feel clean, like something toxic just left my body." "That's what truth does," she said. "It purges." "Is that why it hurts?" Amanda was quiet for a beat. Then, "Maybe. Or maybe it's because you were never meant to carry it alone." For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Not just because Amanda was on the other line, but because people were listening now. People who had lived in the same shadows, who knew what it meant to be buried under the weight of someone else's reputation. And maybe, just maybe, some of them were finally ready to speak too. The morning after the article dropped, the world felt louder. Not outside. Inside. Every ding of my phone, every flicker of a notification, vibrated like a warning. Attention, even when deserved, had a weight. And I had gone from invisible to unavoidable. But it wasn't the press calls or podcast invites that rattled me. It was the silence from inside my family. No denial, no public statement, no legal threat. Just a deep, deliberate quiet. They were regrouping, waiting for the next move, trying to decide if I was still manageable or already a wildfire. Then, 3 days later, the first crack appeared. It wasn't from my father. It was from the person I thought would never flinch. My mother. She showed up at the front gate of my grandmother's house, unannounced. No driver, no makeup. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who had been holding her breath for years and had finally let it go. I didn't open the gate right away. I watched her from the security camera. She didn't knock or buzz. She just stood there, arms folded, waiting like she owned the right to be let in. I opened the gate, but not the door. When I finally stepped out onto the porch, I didn't say a word. She spoke first. "Can we talk?" The tone wasn't apologetic. Not quite commanding either. It was something in between. The voice of a woman used to being obeyed, but now unsure if her name still carried value. I nodded once and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, taking in the house like it was a foreign country. "This place hasn't changed," she said, running her fingers along the mantel. "Your grandmother always had such awful taste." The air between us tightened. "You're not here to critique her decor." "No," she admitted, turning to face me. "I'm here because your father is losing control." That was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. I raised an eyebrow. "Good. You don't understand what you've started." "Sure I do," I said, stepping closer. "I started telling the truth." Her jaw clenched. "The truth has a price," she snapped. "I've already paid," I replied, louder than I intended. Her eyes didn't flinch. "You think this makes you powerful? You think dragging the family through the mud gives you some kind of justice? There are consequences, Soraya. Legal ones, financial ones. I'm aware. And emotional ones," she added more quietly. I took a breath. "The only emotion I feel is relief." Her expression cracked, just slightly. "Your father is dangerous when cornered. You've put all of us at risk." I stared at her. "No, he did that. When he made me the scapegoat, when he laundered money through my name, when you let him." Her mouth opened, then closed again. There it was. The first real silence. Not the kind built from power, but from absence. Absence of defense, of justification, of the illusion that she hadn't known. I waited. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't know it was that deep." "You knew enough." She nodded slowly. "We thought, if we protected him, we protected ourselves. Our name, our life." I looked around the room. At the faded wallpaper, the creaky floorboards, the decades of quiet resistance my grandmother had filled this house with. "He never protected me." A beat passed. Then she said, "That article, it's not the end, is it?" "No," I said flatly. "It's just the prologue." Her eyes searched mine. "And what comes next?" "You'll find out with everyone else." She left without asking for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. The next wave came faster than I expected. Amanda called me in a rush, voice tight. "He's moving money, fast, overseas." What does that mean? It means he's scared, but it also means he's trying to vanish before this turns criminal. Can we stop him? Not alone. That night, we uploaded everything we had to a private Dropbox for federal investigators. Names, account numbers, IP logs, audio, screenshots. Amanda labeled it Operation Daughter. I just called it Survival. The next morning, Serena showed up. Not physically, on TV, a local morning show. She sat in a blush pink dress, poised and perfectly lit, wiping away fake tears. "I just want to say how deeply betrayed I feel. Soraya was always difficult, always jealous, but I never thought she'd fabricate something like this." The host leaned in sympathetically. "And your parents?" "My mother's devastated," she sniffled, "and my father's heartbroken." I stared at the screen like it was a horror film. Amanda texted me. "She just made it worse for them. Public denial, mute obstruction." I didn't respond, because I wasn't angry. I was impressed. Even now, Serena was consistent. Blame first, feeling second, truth never. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. I answered without speaking. A familiar voice growled on the other end. "You think you've won?" It was Charles. "I think you're losing." He laughed. "Keep playing, Soraya. But remember, I built you. I can unmake you." I hung up, then blocked the number, then deleted it, because that voice didn't scare me anymore. It reminded me of a dying engine, loud, smoked out, desperate, but already broken. 3 days later, federal subpoenas landed on his desk. The company's stock plummeted. 2 board members resigned. An anonymous employee leaked documents to corroborate mine. And I stayed quiet. Let the dominoes fall. Because when a lie is exposed, it doesn't unravel gently. It shatters. And when it does, the sound is unforgettable. It wasn't the subpoenas. It wasn't the televised denial or my mother's cold visits or even the midnight threats whispered into my voicemail. It was the quiet that broke me. The quiet that came after everyone else stopped speaking. The house felt larger than before. Not physically, just louder in its stillness. The kind of silence you can't unhear once you've lived inside chaos. I'd spent months fighting them, collecting files, baiting their egos, pulling the right threads until their perfect family sweater unraveled in public. And now, I didn't know what to do with my hands. I wasn't a whistleblower anymore. I wasn't a target anymore. I wasn't even a daughter anymore. I was something else, something in between. Amanda noticed it first. "You've been quiet," she said during one of our late-night calls. "Ironic, huh?" I replied. "You okay?" I paused. "I don't know what to do now that I'm not angry every day." "That's the real hard part," she said softly. "When you realize justice doesn't always heal you." I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. But wanting peace and knowing how to live in it are two different skill sets. I'd trained myself to anticipate war. Now I needed to learn how to breathe. I started small. I stopped Googling my father's name. I muted every keyword that reminded me of the scandal. I turned off notifications, deleted old voicemails, cleaned out the folder labeled evidence. And then, one morning, I opened a notebook and wrote one sentence. Who am I when I'm not reacting to them? It was a question that followed me everywhere. Into the library, where I wandered without purpose. Into the bakery, where I spent 2 hours watching strangers and imagining who they loved. Into the mirror, where I stared at my own eyes and tried to recognize the person looking back. I was free. Technically. But freedom, I learned, comes with mourning. Because even if the cage was cruel, it was familiar. That was the day I visited the beach. Not Malibu. Not somewhere curated and photographed. Just a raw, wind-whipped stretch of sand outside Ventura. Empty. Honest. I took off my shoes and let the ocean swallow my ankles. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't staged. It just felt like the first place that didn't require me to be anything. I sat there for hours, didn't take pictures, didn't call anyone, just watched the tide take and give. Take and give. And I realized something. For so long, my family only ever took my voice, my worth, my narrative. But now, finally, something was giving. Not to them. To me. 2 weeks later, I moved, packed everything I owned into 4 boxes, and rented a 1-bedroom in Echo Park. Not because it was trendy, but because it was far enough from everything. I changed my number, left no forwarding address, started introducing myself as Elira. Not legally, just spiritually. That was the name I used when I submitted my first short story in years. A fiction piece, loosely based on a woman who was erased and then wrote herself back into existence. It got published in a small online magazine. No fanfare, but I printed it, framed it, hung it over my desk like a map back to myself. One night, a message landed in my inbox. Anonymous sender, no subject, just one line. "You don't know me, but your story saved me." I thought I was alone. I didn't cry. But I did sit back and let my chest rise and fall like I'd just been given permission to exist. That's the thing about stories. They echo. Sometimes, even when you whisper, someone hears you scream. The next week, I launched a podcast. Low key. No sponsors. No big launch. Just a mic, my words, and a title. Unclaimed Daughters. It wasn't about revenge. It was about all the girls who were taught to apologize for existing, all the women who sat through dinners where they weren't seen, all the daughters who became evidence. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell Serena. I didn't even check if they were listening. Because it wasn't for them. It was for the invisible ones. The ones who still flinch when their phone rings. The ones who don't know where to go when they're finally free. The ones who still whisper, "Was it really that bad?" Yes. And it's okay to say it out loud. The first message came on a Monday. I almost deleted it without reading. It was unsigned. The subject line said only, "You didn't hear everything." I clicked out of habit more than interest. By now, most of the emails I got were either from strangers thanking me for sharing my story, or from trolls telling me I destroyed my family for attention. I rarely read them fully, but this one was different. There was an audio file attached, and 5 words in the body of the email. They were never just watching. I hesitated, then clicked play. The recording started with static, then a voice. My sister. She doesn't know. Dad said she never would. Then my mother's voice. She doesn't need to. If she starts asking questions, we shut it down, like last time. Then silence. Then laughter. A man's voice, deep and amused. My father. She'll break herself before she ever figures out how much of it you both knew. I froze. The file ended. The air around me went cold. Not from the weather, from memory. All the moments I tried to convince myself they didn't know. All the times I chose to believe their silence was ignorance, not design. They hadn't just watched him hurt me, they'd helped him do it. I called Amanda. She picked up on the second ring. "I got a recording," I said flatly. There was a pause. "What kind of recording?" They were in on it, not just compliant. Active. Amanda didn't respond right away. "Soraya, are you okay?" I laughed, but it came out like a crack in glass. "I think I finally am." Because the thing about betrayal? Once it stops surprising you, it stops owning you. I sat with that file for hours, not listening to it again, just staring at the waveform like it was a confession etched into the bones of my screen. I didn't feel rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I felt untethered, like whatever part of me had still been attached to that old house, that old hope, had finally, quietly snapped. That night, I packed a bag and drove north. No destination, just road, no plan, just distance. I ended up in a small town by the coast, rented a room above a bookstore. The walls smelled like dust and ink and comfort. The owner, an old man named Saul, handed me a key and said, "People who end up here usually don't plan to. That's how we know they need to be." I thanked him, didn't explain, didn't have to. I spent 3 days offline. No emails, no calls, no podcasts, just long walks, deep sleep, and hours sitting on the wooden balcony, watching strangers pass with coffee and purpose. It felt like living inside someone else's peace, but it fit. Slowly, gently, it fit. On the 4th morning, I got another email, this time from Sophia, the journalist. The subject line read, "Ready when you are." The body, a link to a private, unreleased episode of a national documentary podcast. They had taken my story, woven it with the investigation, made it sound like what it always was. A warning. I listened to all 42 minutes. When it ended, I wrote her back. "Publish it and don't hold back." She replied within minutes. "It'll go up tomorrow. Brace yourself." I wasn't afraid, not this time, because I'd already lost the version of family I was trying to protect. Now I was protecting someone else entirely, myself. When the podcast episode dropped, the backlash came fast. Not against me, against them. Social media unearthed old interviews, clips of Serena defending family values, campaign donations from my father to sketchy politicians, a picture of my mother on a yacht with executives now under indictment. Everything unraveling. Not because I said anything, but because I stopped trying to hide them. That's all it took. removing the shield they built from my silence. Then came the final twist. A reporter from a rival outlet called to confirm a tip that a private fund, named after my grandmother, had been set up years ago using laundered money. It was in my name, and my sister's. But only Serena had been drawing from it. For years. Tuition, real estate, fashion lines that flopped, vacations. And every time she spent that money, she forged my consent. I never saw a dime. And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that my mother had co-signed it. With my name. I stared at the legal documents for an hour. Amanda broke the silence. "You could sue." "I could," I said. "You should." "I might." But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't going to. Not because I was weak, because it wouldn't give me anything I didn't already have. The truth was mine. Their downfall was theirs. And I didn't need a court to validate either. Somewhere between anonymity and legacy, I found my voice. Not the kind you use to win arguments, or call someone out, or even whisper truths too dangerous to speak aloud, but the kind that lives inside your chest like a compass. Quiet, steady, unapologetic, the kind you don't need permission to follow. A month had passed since the last twist, since I learned the fund named after my grandmother had been siphoned dry, that my own name had been used like a blank check, and that my mother and sister had co-signed my erasure like it was part of the family estate plan. But I didn't seek charges, didn't file claims, didn't even send them a message, because the most radical thing you can do to someone who spent their life controlling you is to stop letting them take your peace. I was done being their mirror. They'd spend the rest of their lives staring at their own reflection. My apartment had grown quieter, the kind of quiet you earn. No surveillance, no lawyers, no urgent emails or back-channel leaks. Just the hum of a heater, the scratch of pen on paper, the laughter of neighbors through a thin wall. Peace isn't cinematic, it's mundane. And that's why it's sacred. I opened the window each morning like a ritual. I wrote, not about them, not anymore, but about the people I met in coffee shops. The woman in the green coat who always cried in the same seat on Wednesdays. The boy at the bodega who wrapped flowers in old newspaper and smiled like a secret. The man who played trumpet under the bridge as if his soul lived in brass. The world was full of stories that didn't owe anything to the people who tried to write mine for me. And mine? Mine was still unfolding. The podcast took off quietly. Episode 1 was called The Things We Aren't Allowed to Say Out Loud. Episode 5 was titled Daughters Who Became Paper Trails. Episode 9 went viral, not because it was flashy, because it was honest. I didn't name names. I didn't dramatize the facts. I just talked about the difference between survival and existence, about what it meant to come home to yourself, about how betrayal burns, but silence buries. It wasn't polished, but it resonated. 100,000 downloads, 200. Then I stopped counting, because it wasn't about numbers. It was about proof that we weren't alone. I got letters, long, handwritten ones, short, encrypted ones, DMs from accounts with no photos, no bios, just people too scared to say anything except, I thought it was just me. And every time I read one, I whispered back, it never was. Then, one morning, I woke up to an email from Serena. Subject line, no excuses. I opened it expecting venom. Instead, it said, I don't want forgiveness. I know I won't get it. I just want you to know I'm listening now. It's not enough. I know that too. But I'm starting therapy. For the first time in my life, I'm trying to hear someone other than myself. I stared at the screen. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. Just exhaled. Because healing doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes, it just means you stop bleeding from the wound. That same week, I got an invitation. A TED-style summit on trauma narratives and generational silence. They wanted me to speak, not about my family, not about betrayal, but about what happens after the chaos, after the exposure, after the truth. I hesitated, then said yes. On stage, the lights were warm. The audience was quiet. I didn't use a script. I didn't need one. I started with a question. How many of you were told to keep the family secrets quiet? Hands went up, some fast, some shaking, and I knew then what I'd always suspected, that my story was just a shape made from millions of others. I spoke for 18 minutes, didn't name names, didn't seek pity, just offered a mirror. At the end, I said this: we don't owe our loyalty to the people who taught us to hide. We owe it to the versions of ourselves that still whisper in the dark. Did it really happen? Yes, it did. And it matters. And so do you. After the talk, a woman stopped me near the back exit. She didn't give her name. Didn't need to. She touched my wrist and said, I haven't spoken to my sister in 9 years, not since she told the truth. But tonight, I think I might call her. And that was enough. Back in my apartment that night, I brewed tea, pulled a blanket over my knees, and turned on a voicemail someone left me 3 days ago. It was short. A woman's voice, nervous, maybe crying. Your podcast. I've never told anyone about what my uncle did. I thought I'd take it to my grave. But I told my best friend today. I don't know what comes next, but thank you for helping me start. I sat in that quiet, didn't rush it away, didn't bury it, just held it. Because maybe that's what freedom is, the ability to sit in the silence without fear, to hear your own voice, and finally, recognize it. What I've learned, what I carry now, is that peace doesn't always come through justice. Sometimes it's found in choosing not to fight battles that cost your soul. I no longer need closure from those who broke me. I found it in the life I built after them. If you've ever been silenced by the people who should have protected you, please hear this. Your voice still matters. Your story is not too late. Have you ever walked away from someone for your own peace? What did that moment look like for you? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this video moved you, made you pause, or made you feel seen, let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't connect with you, tell me why. I want to grow too. If you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories like this one. Your presence here means more than you know.